Welcome to Boss Talk, where we talk about selling businesses. My name is Jim Parker, and this is my business partner, Carey Sobel.
We're super excited to be here today, and through this entire series of Boss Talk, we have some really fun topics to talk about throughout our series. Today, we're talking about the episode 1, which is the mindset of brokers is broken. And we talked about this topic name for a while because we're paying homage to those that came before us, the business brokers that paved the way and got us to where we're at today. We're not saying what they did is wrong. We're saying that things have changed. Things have changed in the industry related to information, technology, and so many different things. But we have a unique way of looking at business brokerage, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. The national average states that only 10 to 20% of businesses that are listed for sale actually sell. And Jim, your statistics are showing that you're selling about 90% of your businesses, which is incredible.
Thank you.
And I think some of the things that we talk about today will allude to why you're experiencing that success. But you've been in the business for 25 years. That's a long time in one industry. You've brought me into this industry. I remember our first interview when I was looking to hang my license at Boss Group. And I look up to you and what you've done, and you've helped pave the way for me and for others as a thought leader in the industry. But you've seen a lot of change in 25 years. Talk a little bit about some of the things that you've seen that have drastically changed in this industry for the better or for the worse.
Wow. There are so many things that we could talk about, Carey, when it comes to that. The first thing is, and when I say this, I mean with all due respect, back then when I was working with brokers that when I first got into the industry, Carey, they were very good brokers. They were very good at what they did. I love them as people. But I think that we've grown up a lot from a professional standpoint in this industry. I remember, not everybody, but I remember there was a good amount of brokers that I would show up to a buyer-seller meeting, and the broker on the other side of the table was wearing a Hawaiian shirt, open down to here with a chain, shorts, flip-flops even. And I just remember oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And it kind of looked like a little bit like a used car salesman. And when I say that, I mean, these were good brokers. I mean, they knew what they were doing. They were very knowledgeable. They were good at what they were doing, but it was the professional feeling that you got. And, today's broker, I think, comes across a lot more professional. You typically dresses better. And I think that the industry has also gotten younger. I've seen a lot of younger brokers like yourself, very, very successful, very good at what you do, that's entered the industry. You're killing it. You've been doing great the last few years, Carey.
Thank you.
And I've seen a lot more women getting into the industry. And I think overall, I think that there's more educational opportunities for business brokers than there ever has been, and it just keeps growing. There just keeps me more and more educational opportunities, which just takes us as brokers to another level.
Absolutely. The maturity, the professionalism, and I think a big part of it is access to information and knowledge. Mm-hmm. You had told me when we were talking earlier that you used to do deals and send contracts through fax or facsimile. Yeah. And I didn't ever have to deal with that. I grew up with a computer and the internet, and I think our access to information, how quickly we can get statistics, we can look at comps, we can research something as simple as an NAICS code instead of opening up a booklet and scrolling back and forth.
You can do it in seconds online.
Just punch in the numbers.
The fax machine was funny, Carey. Yeah. And back then, you look at it, you'd be going back and forth with an offer, and you'd go back. Sometimes you go back 3 or 4 times, and you'd get it done, and you couldn't even read the contract.
You're just sitting there at the fax machine, waiting for the paper to come in.
Yeah, to come in, and you could barely read it, and everybody would have it executed. And then what you'd have to do is you have to do a whole new contract. You'd have to do 3 contracts, get the buyer and the seller to put ink to paper on 3 different contracts. You'd give one to the buyer, one to the seller, and then you'd keep one as a broker. And but you'd have to do that once everybody agreed to the contract every time, because by the time you got through the fax machine, you couldn't read it.
Now, I can't even imagine practicing business brokerage with that dynamic. So, when we talk about those that have come before us, it's probably harder to get a transaction done, 20, 30 years ago without the use of technology. I mean, it's incredible the amount of transactions that some of these brokers were able to get done.
Right. I mean, you think back, now I always had this when I was a broker, but you take 10 years before that, the brokers didn't even have cell phones, so you're out in the car, you're going to a meeting, you're there you might be 45 minutes there, an hour at the meeting, 45 minutes back. You're lost in all communications.
Well, what happens if two people are supposed to meet and they're going to a restaurant,
right.
and one of them goes to the other restaurant, and now you don't even have a way to communicate with each other?
Correct.
I can't imagine.
I don't know how they did that.
Yeah. It's impressive. And, so as every industry matures, right? Business was done without the internet in every single industry. But access to information and technology has allowed us to evolve. And I think what it's done is it's shown us that before you would maybe put so much extra time towards a transaction. And now I think in our business, time is our most valuable asset.
It is. Time is our most valuable asset.
And we have to protect our time.
Right.
And one of the things when I first came into the industry, you mentioned used car salesman. And where my mind immediately goes is a numbers game, right? Quantity. The more listings you carry, the more opportunity you have to put a listing under contract, the more opportunity that you have to sell.
Carey, I think that's probably was the biggest broken business brokerage mentality that was taught back then, and unfortunately I feel like it's still being taught today.
Yep.
Go out and try to list everything and anything you possibly can. You never know what's going to sell. Those businesses that you do list that are not so good, maybe there's a buyer for that type of business. But when you're dealing with a situation like that where you have 25, 30 listings, and most of them, 80% of them, are not good businesses, you're spreading your time and your energy across all those 25, 30 listings, and you're taking away from the good listings. The owners that have good businesses that are really sellable, you still have to handle all those listings that you got going on. You got to handle the buyer inquiries, you got to handle everything. And you're taking time away, and you're taking away your resources, your money, your office staff's time, everybody. So I'm a firm believer being very, very selective on the businesses that you're going to take on.
It's now a quality over quantity.
Yeah.
And, you had mentioned you almost do a disservice to your sellers if you're managing that many listings. And, 90% sales rate is really impressive. And a part of that is saying, this business is something I'm proud to represent, and I'm not just doing it, because it's a numbers game, and if I get 15 listings, I'll sell 5 of them. And that is a big thing that you've changed and I've adopted in my practice. And I think it comes down to being okay saying no.
Yeah, no, I think no is a big word. That's a no you have to learn to be. You have to learn to say no. That's a powerful, powerful statement. And it's not just saying no, right? Because our job is to educate sellers when they come to us to sell their business. A lot of times people reach out to us and it's the first time they've been through this. It's an emotional process. It's an arduous process. And we won't just say no, we'll say no, but. Yeah.
No, but your business may not be ready because of this. No, but I don't think that I'm the best broker for this. Whether you represent a specific industry or you only sell businesses over a certain dollar amount, but really at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you feel like you can be successful.
Carey, you're absolutely right with that, because it's not just saying no because it's not a good business, but sometimes a good business will come across my desk and I'll be looking at it and I'll be like, okay, this is a good business. This would be a good listing if it was priced properly, and that's a different story. But if it's priced properly, this is good business. It would be a good listing. This is something sellable, but maybe I'm not the best person for that particular business. And that happens to me a lot. Yep. A lot of times I'm talking to a seller and I'm realizing, yeah, this is a great opportunity. This is going to be great for the marketplace, but I'm not the best business broker to do that. And I think as business brokers, we have to look at our strengths and our weaknesses, where we excel at, where we don't excel at, and count out the businesses that are not going to be are going to be really hard to sell. And then even if they are sellable, are we the best person to be representing that type of business or handling that sale? Or sometimes, and I've talked to you about this before, I've got a couple businesses now that I talked to the business owner. I thought they were great businesses, but for one reason or another, I told them we need to hold off on taking your business to the market.
Right.
I want to maximize your sales price. I want to increase the chances that you're going to sell your business. And after having what I call an assessment call with them, where we get really detailed, I've looked at the financials and then I'm getting detailed and asking them detailed questions. I'm realizing, okay, you're gonna increase your chances of selling and maximize your sales price if you do this, 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 and that.
So that no but is we'll work with you to help you get to where you want to be.
Yeah.
But you need to do these things first. And I think there's a level of confidence that a business owner gets when we say, you could get this dollar amount. Buyer says, I want $1 million. We say your business is worth $500K. We don't say no to that if we think it's a good business. We say, here's how you can get that $1 million value. We
or $2 million or $3 million. Yeah.
We stay in touch. Let's stay in touch quarterly. We're going to give advice on how they can better position themselves, from financials to removing a seller from the business. A lot of different things. So, no but is a big thing. And you gave me an example. There was a business that you were going to bring to market. I recall the number. It was $750,000. Do you remember that example? Where I'm going with that?
I don't remember particularly which one.
There was another one where you talked about 3 partners.
Oh, yes. Well, there was. I think I know which one you're talking about. The first one.
Yeah.
There was a business owner that I talked to, husband and wife, and I looked at their financials. We had a conversation, and I looked at it and I said, do you think that this year you're going to have the same numbers or better than you had last year? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. And I go, well, if you hold off and you wait another 6-7 months until we finish out the year, you're going to get about 30% more for your money, because it would cash flow from an SBA standpoint. And, they wanted to retire right away. And I said, it's your choice. I'm just giving you the information.
Of course.
And they said, what would you do? And I said, well, it's time versus money. If you feel secure enough in the funds that you have for retirement, and you're more concerned about the time that you have, let's list and take it to the market now.
Yes.
But, Carey, that's a decision that they have to make. And at the end of the day, they said, you know what? That's a lot of extra money for us in retirement that would really improve our retirement. Let's hold off. I'm not a business consultant. I could probably be a business consultant, but that's not my role to be a business consultant. But I'm going to look at it from a business broker standpoint, where, what are the holes that a buyer is going to look at? What are the things that are going to get buyers excited? What are the things that are going to get buyers worried about it? What do the financials look like? What is the SBA is going to look at it? What are the legal consequences that we're going to be, facing when we're putting together this contract? And that's what we need to be looking at. We have business consultants that we can say, hey, if you're not ready to sell now, we can do a broker's opinion of value. This is how much your business is worth. These are the things that you should probably fix, before you go to the market, and we can talk to them about that. But then you might want to have a business consultant help you achieve those things, and then come back and get your market and put your business in the market.
And we're here to bridge that gap when we deliver the news of, sorry, we're not going to be able to get you the value you want, but here's how you can get there. And I think we gain a good deal of respect by doing that. And it's frustrating because so many times when people reach out to us and they want to sell their business, they're reaching out to us because they want to sell their business now. This is something that you need to plan for well ahead of time. And we always encourage people that if they're considering selling their business in 6 months, in a year and a half from now, to reach out to us ahead of time so we can properly advise them and tell them what they're going to need to do to prepare it, instead of coming to us and saying, I'm in a pickle, I need to sell now. Now, unforeseen circumstances come, like sickness or a big lifestyle change or something that happens in their life where they have to.
Death in the family, or something tragic like that.
But if not, I cannot advise strong enough, if you are considering the sale of your business anytime in the near future, to open up the dialogue with a broker now and start having that conversation. And back to the point that you were giving about a person holding off a little bit to get a higher dollar amount. What we'll hear a lot is, well, what if we just test the market at a higher price? Let's list it at the higher price and see if we can get it. Tell me what you think about that. How has that changed?
Well, yeah, that happens a lot. Even today. That happened back in the day, but it even happens today where, brokers, the sellers, they want to, like you said, they want to go at a higher price. They want to go to the market at that. And a lot of brokers will just go to the market at that price. That's what the seller wants, to go to the market. And I think part of their mentality is that maybe 3-4 months down the road, that seller will drop their price and get it into a price range that is going to be more sellable.
And why doesn't that work?
Well, this is my thinking. First of all, the marketplace has already been tested. When we price businesses, we're looking at businesses that have sold in the same industry, in the same around gross sales range of the target business. And so the market's already been tested.
Right.
And this is the big thing too, is that I'm going to use this example, somebody looking to buy a house. The buyers that are looking to buy a home, the cycle of that buyer is pretty short. Right. From the moment they say, I want to buy a house, to the moment that they find a house and they go under contract with it, you're talking less than 60 days.
Sometimes it's less than 60 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, seriously. And when I talk to buyers that are looking to buy a business, I always ask them, well, how long have you been looking for buying a business? And they say anywhere from a couple months to a couple years. So it's a long process to find a business that they feel comfortable in having, that is a good business, that's in the areas that they want, that is priced right, that has the financials. I mean, it's a long process. And so what you have is you have all these buyers that are built up looking for that business. And when you take a business to the market, me and you've talked about this a lot of times, we call it the buyer wave. And the buyer wave is that when you take a business to the market, the first 30 days is the most critical time period when you take a business to the market. That's when you're going to have the most buyers looking at that business. Those buyers have been looking for a couple months to a couple years. Oh, there's a new business on the market. Great, let me look into that. And you know what? If it's overpriced, if it's not packaged properly, if it's not handled correctly, the buyer's like, yep, just another one. Because they've been looking for a while. They know the game. They know that most of the stuff out there is junk, overpriced. It's not being handled properly. The sales process is not being handled. Nothing's going, and they get frustrated and they just move on very, very quickly. So that first 30 days, you price it right. It's a good business. You're handling it correctly. You're packaging it properly. You're doing what you're supposed to do. And obviously we have strategies that we can't talk on the show about either. When you take that market the first 30 days, you're getting all those buyers that are interested and be like, oh my gosh, okay, great. And all those buyers are looking at it, and that's what you want, is a lot of people looking at it. The first 30 days is the most critical.
I couldn't agree more.
And I try to do is go get that business under contract within the first 60 days. And we don't always do that. I would say probably about 60-70% of the time we're successful in getting under contract in the first 60 days. But if they don't get then, it's usually a month or two later. But it's just really important. And
when we talked about putting businesses on the market at a higher price, I mean, buyers are doing a sniff test. So, they're scrolling through all the available businesses and they see something that's overpriced, they're on to the next one. So putting it out there, priced to sell, and standing firm on where you're at, we would advise that as a better strategy than trying to get the highest dollar amount that is unrealistic. We want to set proper expectations. So testing the market with a higher price when you're allowing the seller to dictate the sale of the business, right? Or the price. They reach out to us for our expert opinion, but some of them just want to use us as pawns. I think my business is worth X. I think you should list it for X. Take it and list it for X.
This is what I need.
Yes.
This is how much I need. Well, what you need and what you're going to actually, get are two different things, and they have to keep that in mind. And the thing is, when you take that business to the market at a higher price, and what's going to happen is the buyers that have been pent up, that buyer wave, that first 30 days, they're looking at it and they're going up, and they move on. Very few of those buyers actually come back later and look at those businesses again that have been listed and go, okay, all right, they came down on price, You missed that buyer wave.
Yes.
So at this point, what you got the buyers entering the market for the first time that are looking at that business.
Right.
And we all have to start somewhere. I love new buyers because they're coming in and they're getting their feet wet. But the problem with buyers that are getting into the market for the first time is that they're going, okay, looks like a great business. It's priced reasonably. I like, how it's being presented. I like that the information, blah, 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 blah. But they're like, I just started looking. Let me see what else is around. Now that buyer 6 months later is going, I wish I would have made a move on that business. And that's what ends up happening is the seller, you miss that wave, and now you got the buyers that are trickling in, and you're just dropping your price. And then you get that one buyer that finally is like, if you're lucky, because you're not only decreasing your chances of getting the maximum price, but you're decreasing the chances of actually selling the business.
And the longer the business sits out there, the longer it rots.
Yeah.
And let's dive a little bit more into the buyer wave, and a fundamental, challenge statement I'll give you around that is speed to market wins. Bring the business to market as fast as you can. Just get it up, gather the information later. Let's talk about how that relates to the wave and the first time that you introduced a business to market. At Boss Group, we have a process that we have that we're not rushing to bring a business to market as fast as possible. We're trying to get a business to market with the best representation as possible. Yeah. So speed to market wins is not really the case in representing a business.
Yeah, right. And I don't know if representing is the right word, but yeah, but I get what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. And I think that's one of the questions. If you're looking to sell your business, please contact myself or Carey. We would love to have a conversation with you. But if you're talking to another broker, I think that's a very important question that you ask. You add that to your list. How long does it take you to get the business to the market? And if they say, well, I can do it the same day or the next day, I would run. I really would. I look at us. It takes us 2 to 3 weeks to take a business, and once we have it listed for sale, to actually get it to the market. And I actually think 2 to 3 weeks is really, really good
quick
for everything that we're doing.
Yes.
But there's so many brokers out there that will just list the business and they throw it out there, and then if they start getting those buyer inquiries, and you know how that goes.
They're doing themselves a disservice. And we talked about time and managing our time. And if you spend the time up front to properly bring a business to market the right way, we're saving ourselves time. We're saving our sellers time, because we're answering a lot of the questions that these buyers have in the documentation we put together. Yep. So you mentioned 2 to 3 weeks. Sometimes it may be 4 to 5. Maybe we get it done faster. But what we're doing is we are interviewing the sellers. We're asking them all of the questions that we think a buyer can ask them. Mm-hmm. We're putting all of that information together in a beautiful SIM or confidential information memorandum, so that once we've qualified a buyer and we know that that buyer has the experience or the finances to acquire a business of that sort, we're delivering them damn near every piece of information they could possibly need to say, yeah, I want to take the next step and meet with that seller.
Right. Yeah, it does. It's more time up front with the seller, but it's, because of our processes, but it saves them a lot more time on the back end.
Yeah, and I always tell our sellers when they do list a business with us, I say, I'm going to give you a lot of homework up front, and it's going to be, laborious. I'm going to ask you questions over and over again. I'm going to ask you questions that you're saying, why are you even asking me these questions? But ultimately what it comes down to is those are the questions that somebody's going to ask when they sit down with you face to face. So if we can do all of that due diligence on the front end and position all of that information to a buyer, one, there's less buyer-seller meetings. They're waiting until they've really analyzed if it is the right business for them. And it relates directly to the wave. Mm-hmm. So you bring a business to market, those 30 days or 60 days, we're trying to have the business under contract, because most of the time where somebody is questioning, is this business for me or not, is all the back and forth. Yep. So if we can take some of that back and forth out by putting that in the representation of a business in the beginning when we deliver something to market, you're saving time for everybody.
The title of our show today is The Mindset of the Business Broker is Broken. And I think in some ways our industry is kind of broken. And it's because of the way things have been passed on from one broker to another as brokers get into the industry. And you look at it, 10 to 20% of businesses for sale sell. So 80 to 90% of the businesses on the market do not sell. And then 50% of the businesses that go under contract fall apart before they get to the closing table. And we can't have that happen. It's kind of like playing chess. You play chess, and if me and you were playing chess, and I'm really bad at chess, the reason I'm bad at chess is because I would make a move and then you'd make a move, but I would wait for you to make your move before I decide what move I wanted to make. Obviously, as a good chess player, you know that you're thinking many, many moves ahead, and that's what we need. That's what you need to do when you're selling a business. Is you're strategizing, you're making those plans so far ahead, and you're looking at what obstacles you're going to face, the pitfalls that could come about, how you're going to navigate the entire process. You need to be thinking that up front.
Oh yeah. So
that you're not kind of just weaving your way through. I just recently talked to a seller that was working with a broker for a year, trying to get a transaction done, and it was like problem after problem after problem. And as I was talking to the seller about these problems, it sounded like 90% of them could have been avoided if that preparation was done in the beginning.
I couldn't agree more. And one thing that I've done recently that, I always do a SWOT analysis when I'm interviewing a seller. Tell me about the strengths and the opportunities for your business, and they're so happy to talk about them. And when I ask about the weaknesses and the threats, they're a little apprehensive. And I say, day one, let's pull all the skeletons out of the closet.
Exactly.
I want to know everything about your business that a buyer is going to say, hold on a second, this is a red flag. What I'm doing is I'm actually addressing those red flags in the SIM, in the confidential information memorandum that I am using to help sell a business. I'm also putting out the flags or the threats or the weaknesses. So a buyer can either look at those as opportunities for them to improve, or that when you get down to that under contract and only 50% of the businesses actually make it to the closing table, half of the time it's because some of those things were not brought up day one.
Right.
So if we can expose that in the beginning, you're showing the true colors of a business. And
before you even go to market.
Before you go to market.
Yeah.
I really think that the number one thing that gets a business to the closing table is establishing integrity between the buyer and the seller. They have to like each other, they have to trust each other, and they have to understand that anything about the business that could be a red flag is brought up day one. They're not trying to hide anything. So let's address that from the beginning instead of wasting the seller's time with a listing and selfishly our time to represent a business where this comes up the day before closing.
And the buyer's going to find out. They're going to do their due diligence and they're going to find out. And I want to know from an ethical standpoint what the situation is. I want to be able to sleep at night. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I want to work with sellers that have that same viewpoint. If a seller is trying to hide those skeletons and is doesn't want to tell me, doesn't want to tell a buyer, that's not a seller that I want to work with.
Right.
I want a seller that I like and I trust and I know that's honest.
You gave me an interesting anecdote about this one of the last times that we were talking, and you said, I'm at this point in my career where I consider myself successful, I do a damn good job, but I want to work with people I like.
Yeah.
So when you're interviewing a seller or a seller is interviewing you, I got a call the other day and a guy said, I'm interviewing 5 brokers. I would like you to give me your pitch. And I gave him my pitch. And when I was done, I said, I want to interview you.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I want to see,
it's a two-way street.
I want to see if I can work with you. I want to see if this is a good match for us to work together.
We're going to be going into an engagement together that we're going to be working together very, very closely for multiple months. I don't want to, every time I have to call that person, I'm dreading making that phone call.
Yep.
And I don't want them to feel that way about me. There's got to be, we don't have to be best friends. A lot of times we turn out to be really good friends, but we don't have to be best friends, but we have to like each other and respect each other and know that we can work together, because it isn't me selling the business, it's us selling the business, me and the seller selling that business.
Yeah. And that may be something that reflects back on our topic of the mindset of brokers is broken, where before you're just trying to get a listing. When I started in the business, I had the worst first listing appointment ever, and I'll tell that story in another episode where we talk about horror stories. But I was so scared to not take that listing because I didn't think that another one was going to come around as fast. And I think it's Richard Bronson or somebody that said opportunities are like a bus station or a bus stop. There's another one coming around. Mm-hmm. So back to our topic about saying no. It's, do you like the person you're working with? Is it the right time to bring to the market? Is the seller somebody you want to work with? There's so many attributes that now fall under that quality over quantity.
Well, I think it goes back to what you said too, is that to make a deal successful, a buyer has to like and trust the seller, and the seller has to like and trust the buyer. It makes it very hard to complete a sale of a business if you don't have that component going on. And so that's what I'm looking for in a seller is are they honest and they're trustworthy, and I don't want them to be working with a broker that they feel like is honest and trustworthy. It's a two-way street, Yeah. And as far as preparation, I like using this analogy. Alfred Hitchcock did not like making movies. Did you know that?
I did not.
And the reason he didn't like making movies is because he knew exactly what that movie was going to look like before he even turned the camera on. And so turning on the camera, doing all the filming and all the editing, it was just minutia work for him. And that's how we have to look at it when we're getting ready to go to the market. We have to try to think of everything we possibly can, how we're going to handle it, who the potential buyers are going to be, reach out to those buyers, how the packaging is done, the messaging is going to be done, everything like that.
Yeah.
So
another thing that I think has changed a little bit in the industry is length of listing agreements. Whereas before, if I couldn't get a 12-month listing agreement, I wasn't taking the business because I know it takes so long to sell a business. And we're talking a lot today about packaging it the right way, trying to have it under contract in 30 to 60 days. We've talked about a new strategy of us only taking 6-month listings.
Right. And I don't think that this is something new in the industry. I would say probably most business brokers out there are asking for a 12-month listing time period. Mine is 6 months, 6-month listing period. That's what I'm looking for. And the reason why is because I want to do all that prep work, take it to the market, and my job or my goal, like I said earlier, is to get it under contract within the first 60 days, looking at the first 30 days as the most critical. When I take a business to the market, let's say I take a business to the market on a Friday, on Monday, I'm calling the office already. How many buyer inquiries did we have? How many confidentiality agreements were signed? How many, what's our status of interest in the business? And if I don't think it's high enough, I'm immediately making any changes that I can possibly make. I'm starting to look through that. Okay, what can we do? How can we adjust things? How can we make these changes so that we can get that interest level? And I think that's critical. Where I've seen it over and over again. And I used to do this, and I know a lot of brokers do this. They would get a listing, and they would put all the marketing and advertising together, send it out, and they're not getting much activity. And 3 or 4 months later, they're like, why aren't I getting much activity on this listing? Because you got 25 other listings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
How do you have the focus to...
Yeah, when you have less listings and they're quality listings, and you're putting, as a broker, we're putting our resources of our company behind this. We don't charge any upfront fees to our sellers. We're hiring a professional writer. We're hiring a professional graphic designer. We're sitting down and we're strategizing what message we're going to be putting out there, the types of buyers that are most likely going to be acquiring this business. We're putting our money, we're taking money out of our pocket to sell that business for the seller. And, we got to do it efficiently and effectively. And you got 25 listings. You kind of oversee that. And plus you're getting a better relationship with the sellers as well when you have less listings, and then you can put the resources into the business.
So essentially, if you bring a business to market, it's passed your litmus test that you think that is a quality business that's ready to sell.
Right.
So that's why
that's step one.
That's step one.
That's step one. There's many other steps behind that.
So if it's past the litmus test and it's on market and we're 30 days in and you're not getting activity on it, it's a weekend in from when you release it, because we know the buyers are there. They're like piranhas waiting for a business to just drop into the market and they go after it. If you're not getting activity on it, you're scratching your head because you took a quality business to market. You properly represented that business. So maybe it's just tweaking the targeting.
It's tweaking at that point. It's tweaking, just seeing, hey, what's going on? Because it's very rare that we're not getting any hits right off the bat.
Right.
But I want to get as much interest as we possibly can in the shortest period of time, because that's what's going to obviously increase the chances of it selling or getting it sold quicker, but it's also maximizing that sales price.
Yep.
Whereas you're dealing with, later on, 5 months, 6 months go down the road and you get that one-off buyer that finally puts an offer in. You don't have much negotiation room with that buyer.
Right.
You know what I mean? That might be the only buyer that stepped forward in the last 3 months, and you're kind of stuck there. And you've already dropped your price, trying to get that interest. You've already missed that buyer wave, and you're dropping that price, and then you get that one person puts an offer in, and it's like, okay, well, we got to be careful. Whereas when you realize that there's a buyer wave out there and you embrace that buyer wave and you're really aggressive with the marketing and the advertising, the messaging, how you're handling it, and you're trying to create a situation where you're getting a lot of buyers that are interested in it and you're getting multiple offers, and that's what's going to keep that price up the highest it can possibly be. And a lot of times I've had a couple businesses this year that went under contract or sold for ever asking price. And that's the direct result by having multiple buyers at the same time putting offers in.
And definitely one of our other topics to discuss is how you're bringing businesses to the market with pricing. Maybe there's no price, maybe there is a price. So I'm excited to talk about that. But back to our topic, I think something that's unique about Boss Group and relative to a topic of mindset of brokers is broken is there's very large companies out there that have franchises across the country. And then there's boutique brokerages like us. And when I joined, I think we had 10, 15, 20 agents, something like that. And I definitely want you to touch on what we've changed there. But I also want to address the individual broker who's trying to do an entire transaction themselves.
Right.
They're trying to make the phone call to find the prospect, to list the business for sale, to package it up, to talk to all of the buyers, put it under contract, do the due diligence, get the closing paperwork done, close a business. That's a lot for one person to do.
Right.
We have a little bit of a different approach, and we use a team strategy with a boutique brokerage. Let's talk about the evolution of Boss Group and maybe how we're doing things differently.
So at one point in 2016, there was 23 agents at Boss Group. So we were a decent sized brokerage house in terms of agents.
Right.
We had 23 agents, and it was a crossroads for me. Do I continue to grow the business? In 2016, that was 6 years. I started Boss Group in 2010. So 6 years later, it was 23 agents.
Wow.
And I was at a crossroads. Do I want to grow the brokerage, Boss Group, to a point where it's really, really big and we have all these agents? Or do I want to keep it small and be elite? And I chose that we should be small and elite. So I got on the phone one day in February 2016 and I actually let go of 17 agents in one day.
I made the cut.
And I cut the best of the best. Not only made the cut, but we became business partners. So me, you, and Tony, that's when we became business partners.
Yep.
Is that you were killing it out there. Not only were you one of those 6 people, but you were killing it. So we became partners at that time. And I love it because we are small, but all of our agents at Boss Group are extremely knowledgeable, and they're extremely good at what they do. They're extremely seasoned. They're honest. They're trustworthy. They're just the kind of people that you really, really want. And I'm happy for it because that's what I feel like. That's what I want Boss Group to be. Because I felt like we were heading down the thing where everybody was good,
house.
but there was 23 and it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But people didn't, not everybody knew everything that they should have known, and people are cutting corners. And I was like, I don't want any of this. I want to have a quality company. That's what I had envisioned.
And I remember that conversation, and part of our strategy was to build a back office support that would allow us to do what we do best, which is engaging with sellers and helping them navigate the process. But we know we can't do it without our back office. And to scale a back office with 23 or however many brokers we had, that's a huge investment. But also, do you have the quality back office? We feel really confident because we have people that are working on packaging our materials together. We have a slew of designers that we worked with. We have a slew of copywriters that we worked with. We have a fantastic closing coordinator that helps when we put something under contract, bring it to close. We have a listing manager that's making sure that our listings are up to date and we have all the information we need. It's very challenging for the independent individual practitioner to do all of those things themselves and do it well.
Yeah, in the space that we work, it's very, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about selling your business, I want to say that business brokerage, Main Street business brokers or upper Main Street business brokers, typically, whether they're working with a big company or boutique company, it's typically they're a 1099, they're a subcontractor, and they're working the deals themselves from A to Z. Just like a residential real estate agent that's looking to sell a house. They're doing everything together. Now, selling a house and selling a business is selling a business is night and day, and you're on steroids when you're selling a business. There's so much you need to do, and there's so much you need to know, and there's so many moving parts to when you're selling a business, and there's hundreds and hundreds of things that the agent needs to do. And when you look at that, there's no way that one person can be great at every little thing. And that was the approach that me, you, and Tony sat down and talked about back in 2016 when we made this major shift of which has turned out fantastic, is that we've broken down the process and we've put the correct people in each step of that process that are really good or have the talents in each one of those aspects. So we have a writer that's for writing. We have a graphic designer for the graphic designer, the closing coordinator, the listing manager. It goes on and on and on. But we have a whole team that's underneath of us that are assisting us in getting that business sold. It's not just that one person that may be great at this, not good at this, horrible at that. Our team just is built out as a machine. It's a machine that is unstoppable. I mean, really,
we called it a conveyor belt. And, I remember how overwhelmed I was when I was training to be a business broker, and I saw the checklists of things that needed to get done. The checklist for listing, the checklist for packaging.
For the agents, yes.
For the agents, yes. The checklist for closing. I was like, first of all, thankfully, there is a checklist.
Yeah.
But how many steps were in it? It goes, how do I do all of that?
Right.
And,
And do it all good.
And do it all good.
Excel at all that.
So I think we've definitely hit a stride with that, but we're using automations. We're using technology to help us facilitate the process. There's certain little points of the engagement between a seller and the company that's representing their business, or a buyer that's trying to inquire about a business, that we use some automation and technology to make sure the buyer's getting the info when they want it,
yep.
and the seller's getting the responses when they want it. So that's a way that maybe the mindset of brokers isn't broken, but we've evolved by leveraging technology, by leveraging division of labor, and it's something that we're seeing most of the other brokerages do as well.
And systems and processes.
Without question.
This is an analogy I like to give a lot, and I like to give this a lot, but it's the best analogy. I don't know if this is a true story, but it's a good story. And this is how the story goes, that in the 1970s, there was a Japanese company that made the best muffler out there. And so an American company came along and said, why is this company from Japan making these mufflers so great? We need to know. So they did reverse engineering. Reverse engineering is when you take a competitor's product apart and you look at it and you see how it's put together and what kind of parts that they use. And so they did reverse engineering on this muffler. And when they did it, looked at it and the team looked at it and they said, all the parts in this muffler are the same as ours. Why is this muffler so much better than our muffler? And they couldn't figure it out until they started examining every little tiny piece of that muffler down to the screws, the bolts, and the washers, and they realized every little piece of that muffler was just a little bit better than theirs. But when you put it all together, it was exponentially better. And that's kind of the process that we've adopted at Boss Group, is we've taken our systems of selling a business and we've broken it down, and use of people, technology, strategies, and just broken down these systems and just looked at every little part. And we're not done. We're never going to be done.
Nope.
It's constantly trying to make each part a little bit better, and that's why we're getting the results that we're getting, Carey.
Yep. And it's technology's widened the gap a little bit between different, and we've adopted the radical change that's happening in the information age, and I think it's why it's kept us ahead of the game and as industry leaders.
Right.
Jim, challenge statement for you. This is something that we've talked about this quite a bit. Well,
I'm up for a challenge.
We've talked about this quite a bit, and
maybe we should tell the audience what these buzzers are.
Sure. So you'll notice that in these episodes, Jim and I love to talk and love to tell stories, and we will go off on energetic tangents.
So this is our way to cut it off, and I think Carey's doing it right now, so it's just a way to cut it off.
Exactly. So I'm going to go right to the next point. Keep the buyer and the seller as far apart as possible until we get to the closing table.
Right. I think that's I was told that for many years, and that's, I think, the worst thing you can do.
Because something could go wrong between buyer and seller leading up to it, right?
Buyer and seller together, and
might throw off your deal.
They could argue and da. No, we embrace that relationship. I mean, a large part of why a buyer puts an offer in is because they like the business, but they also like the seller. This is a long process. This isn't like going into a used car lot, buying the car, and driving off the lot. We're talking about closings that could be a couple months. So the thing is the buyer's putting an offer in because they like the business, and a lot of times they like the seller a lot. And the seller, when there's multiple offers, obviously they're looking at price, they're looking at terms. We're also looking at, who's most likely to get to the closing table. But a lot of times the seller is like, I want to go with this buyer because I like them. And I feel good about that buyer. They're taking over my baby. But once we go under contract, it was always like keep the buyer and the seller completely apart. Try to keep them apart. And we embrace that communication. Now it's controlled communication.
Yes.
You know, because you're a business owner, and we go under contract with your business. You don't want the buyer calling you up five times a day asking you all these questions, But we have a structured system. You know, on my practice, once we go under contract, we have a buyer-seller phone call every 2 weeks where we call into a call-in number, myself, our closing coordinator, the buyer and the seller all jump on a call. The seller talks about updates that's going on in the business. You know, I landed a new contract or this happened, blah, 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 blah. Buyer's giving updates on what's going on with their lending or whatever it is, and the buyer can ask questions to the seller, and it's just a good way to keep that communication flowing. And typically those calls will last about an hour until we get to the process. If there's an SBA loan involved, we get to the process that is going into underwriting and or is close to getting into underwriting, and we might, those calls might last 10 minutes because there might not be much to talk about. And then about 2 or 3 weeks before closing, those calls will turn into a weekly call because we're getting ready to do the transition from one party to the other. So there's a lot more to talk about. But I embrace that communication. And one of the reasons why I embrace that communication is I want the buyer to know what's going on, and I want them to hear it directly from the seller. I want the seller to know what's going on. I want them to hear it directly from the buyer, but I also want them to continue building that bond because there's going to be a little bit of a training period post-closing, and it also makes the transition happen very, very smooth, much more smoothly when you're doing that. And if there is a problem that pops up, which problems do pop up, the buyer and the seller have that relationship, and it's easier to work through that situation when they feel comfortable with each other.
And if that issue comes up at the first buyer-seller scheduled cadence meeting, as opposed to 8 weeks through due diligence, you just save time.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
you save
exactly.
time, and it's really about establishing rapport. Like I mentioned, getting to the closing table is about building integrity between the buyer and seller, where they trust each other. Mm-hmm. And if they're meeting at a weekly cadence, they're not just talking about the business, they're learning about each other's family, their hobbies, their interests. And like you said, almost every transaction has at least a familiarization period where buyer and seller finally shake hands, sign the paperwork, money's wired, deal's closed. That seller and the buyer are working together for at least a specified period of time after closing. Right. Sometimes they're partnered up. If the buyer is allowing the seller to roll over equity and they're going to be partners moving forward, or there's a 1-year employment contract or an earnout, if the buyer and seller build their rapport the day of closing and not before, they have no experience or relationship with each other. So it really makes a better deal. They feel better about it. And I used to do the same thing too, Jim. I would get nervous for buyer-seller calls, but now I'm encouraged to have them as soon as possible.
They're fantastic. Even if the seller's only going to stay on for a training period for 30 days post-closing, it's still going in. 30 days is still a long time for working with somebody you don't know. And this is their baby. I mean, you're selling your business. You've built this business from scratch. It's your baby. You want to make sure that
it's the right person.
Yeah, and they got the insight so that when they do, actually sign the paperwork that day, they've kind of understand what's been going on in that business since the LOI all the way up until we get to the closing table. Yeah. Those calls are extremely important.
When a seller sells their business,
I can't believe not every broker's doing that, by the way. Yeah. Not slamming brokers, but if a business broker is looking, I encourage you to adopt what we do. Yeah.
Certainly. A seller that is selling their business, oftentimes, maybe it's a business they ran for a couple years, it's not a big deal. But most of the time, there's an emotional connection there, and the seller is leaving their legacy to somebody else. Their goal is to grab a sum of money for the time they put in for the business. Right. But if they've worked in that business for 30 years, I'm working with a gentleman right now that started this business from scratch. He's worked in it for 35 years. He's went through some incredible life changes through it. He's lost a partner through it. And he cares about the person that comes to buy his business. Mm-hmm. He cares about, do they have integrity? Are they going to treat their employees the same way he did? So as you start to get to know your counterpart, your buyer, you want to spend all of that time to make sure it's the right person. Right. And I always tell my sellers, when you're doing a first buyer-seller meeting and these buyers are calling you up and interviewing you about your business, you're interviewing that buyer to make sure it's the right fit for you too.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. And that's one of the things when I'm talking to a business owner, I want to have conversations about, obviously why they want to sell, what they're going to do post-closing. I want to know, what their ideal buyer is. I might challenge them on that, but I want to climb in the mindset of you business owner that's thinking about selling, so I can help you the best get a deal that you're happy with and that you're satisfied with.
Which is not just a dollar.
Yeah, it's not just the money.
Yeah.
It's not.
And we could talk about so many different things related to what's changed in the industry and what we've done to help us make successful. But really, what it comes down to is there's generational gaps in this industry. There's technology gaps in this industry, and as things change, we're willing to make the pivots in our business to evolve, to be sure that whatever opportunities are out there to better serve our clients and the people that we transact with, that we're giving it our best efforts to do so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a business owner out there and you're considering selling your business, please reach out to myself or to Carey. We would love to have a conversation with you, point you in the right direction. We could do a broker's opinion of value for you. It doesn't cost you anything. You're not obligated to use our services. We're even willing to sign a confidentiality agreement so that you know that everything is kept confidential. But we'd love for you to reach out. We'd love to have those conversations with you. We do an assessment call. And if it's not a good fit for me, or if it's not good fit for Carey, we can turn you on to somebody else on our team at Boss Group International, or we could turn you on to somebody outside of our company. At the end of the day, we're looking for a good fit between us and the seller.
Absolutely. So. Thank you so much for tuning in today and listening to this episode of Boss Talk. The mindset of brokers is broken. Stay tuned for a lot of really fun topics that we're going to bring to you in the future. On behalf of myself, Carey Sobel, and my partner, Jim Parker, thank you so much for listening to Boss Talk.
Thank you very much.